Good morning, coronavirus germs of both sexes. This is your ticker guy. Quick roundup today, since today is the day after Easter, and of course, we're going to find out what the markets think of all the BS that's going on, oil and everything else. We really ought to be paying attention to the supply chain disruptions that are starting. Folks, there's a number of them that are very, very serious. The pork thing coming out of Smithfield is just one of them. There are, and don't kid yourself, folks. This is not just in one place. Okay, these are, for the most part, businesses that are being forced closed. And we need to take a very close look at where these folks are getting their employees from too, because if you have plants like this that are being forced closed in this kind of a fashion, are we hiring a bunch of illegals that are all living in the same house, which is why it's spreading all over the place? And despite the social distancing thing, how close together are people that work in a pork packing plant actually congregated inside the plant? And the answer is probably not very. The issue is not food safety in a situation like this, because pork is not eaten raw in any circumstance, and at temperatures over about 120 Fahrenheit, viruses are destroyed. So you cook your pork before you eat it, of course. And in fact, although a lot of people don't realize this, you can actually safely eat a rabid animal, provided you cook the flesh. Now, I would not recommend testing this. Obviously, intentionally cooking and eating rabid animals is probably the last thing you ever want to do. Nonetheless, it is a safe practice provided that you cook the meat. And the reason is very simple. That's just the way it works. You have a certain temperature beyond which foodborne pathogens are destroyed. And for viruses, it's much lower than many others. The safe internal temperature for most other things is about 140. And then, of course, you have some other bacteria and stuff that are more resistant to heat, and therefore you have to get things hotter. But the reality is that viruses do not survive heat over about 120 degrees. And so, and that's really not very hot when you think about it. I mean, that's in the area of the scald limit for a hot water heater, as an example. But what this means is that the ordinary process of grilling your pork chops is certainly enough to make sure that everything's fine. So that's not the question. Then we also have a report that's coming out. I think it was New Mexico. Freeport-McMoran shut down a copper mine. Now, for those of you that are unaware, copper is, of course, we all know it goes into wire, right? But it also goes into a lot of other things. These closures are driven from two things. Number one is that you've got states that are in localities that are basically ordering these plants closed, whether people like it or not. And then the other thing that goes along with it is that you have circumstances where workers in many of these plants, especially in the food area, are is Smithfield hiring people that they shouldn't be hiring because they're not really Americans? Good question. We don't ask those questions because we don't really want to know, right? And then we have the other issue that goes along with this which is this is the time in which seeds go in the ground. We have governors like Michigan's who've decided that you can't buy them for yourself. In other words, you can't try to be less reliant upon commerce and the ordinary provision of food. Some of this is truly disturbing. And we, the people of this country, need to make a decision as to whether or not we're going to tolerate this kind of nonsense. Look, I understand that people, nobody wants to get coronavirus and die, all right? Plenty of people have gotten coronavirus and died. The reality is that the so-called suppression measures that we've taken, the mitigations, as Fauci likes to claim, are a bunch of bullshit. And it's not that they don't have costs. They do. They just don't have benefits. The other problem that goes with this, and by the way, if you doubt this, take a look at the graph I keep putting up. I'm not going to do it again today because I don't feel like it. But just tell me why Sweden is not seeing an R value higher than ours when Sweden is not locked down. Okay? No forcible lockdowns in Sweden. And oh my God, all the Karens are screaming about their death rate. Well, you know what? Not really necessarily the case, right? And yet, Smithfield is out and saying, oh, there's likely to be meat shortages. No, really? Well, they're closing down their plants. Oh, by the way, remember that Smithfield, the company, was sold to a Chinese outfit, and Black Jesus was the one that approved that. No, there was no problem there, right? Yeah, let's interconnect all of our supply chains with the people that actually gave us coronavirus, and then let's go ahead and you don't really need any pork. You don't need any food. It's not necessary. It's not a big deal. Oh my God, folks, wake up. Okay. The other thing that the states are doing now is that they're bleeding. They want $500 billion to cover their costs. Well, you know what? The states and governors, they all want the absolute authority to decide what people do and what they want to issue lockdown orders. We have a governor in Kentucky who threatened to arrest people who went to a drive-in church service. Literally arrest. I mean, people say, oh, no, quarantine's not arrest. The hell it's not. A quarantine order for somebody who isn't sick? That's a false arrest. A federal judge stepped in and said, bullshit, okay? Kentucky apparently issued these placards on people's windows in cars anyway. You got to wonder whether or not they're going to try to actually follow through with the threat. Because if they do, they've got themselves a problem. Seeing as there was an injunction issued, that's going to be a fairly serious issue. And by the way, if you think that authorities will not try to actually enforce orders like this, well, if you try to enforce an enjoined order, there's only one thing that ought to happen. And anyone that thinks not, sorry, folks, the Constitution is neither a suicide pact nor is it a plaything and a piece of dead paper. It never has been, and it still isn't. And we as people in the United States ought to be very clear, both with our government and otherwise, that these actions that are claimed to have public health benefits have costs, and those costs need to be borne by the people that make the decisions. Okay, so if a state wants to come out and say, well, for public health reasons, we're closing these restaurants. Okay. States have very broad authority, folks. However, along with that comes the cost in the form of tax revenue. Well, nobody should bail that out under any set of circumstances. You make the decision, you take both the benefits and the costs. I don't know which is the correct choice to make. That is not for me to decide. That is for a state to decide. That is for a governor and a legislature to decide. However, having decided, they get to eat the expense. If that means that they run out of money, well, tough shit. That's the way it goes. I don't understand why people think that these kinds of decisions should be, bailed out by somebody else. Absolutely not. Under no circumstances. The states that make good decisions win. The states that make poor decisions lose. That's the way it works. That's the way it's supposed to work. Okay, we'll close with the Fauci thing. Fauci has been caught lying multiple times. He attempted to throw Donald Trump under the bus over the weekend. And this is an important thing to keep in mind, folks, because there are people out there who think that Fauci is he's in service of public health. His actions are nonpartisan. He doesn't have it in for the Donald, et cetera, et cetera. Da 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 da. Well, that's a very nice premise. Fauci and Birx both have quite a long and storied history when it comes to other areas of public health, including HIV. And those people who do not understand the things that pair, along with a whole bunch of other people, they're just the public face of an outrageously corrupt and crazy set of actions that have taken place in public health when it comes to AIDS over the years. But just looking at that alone, the reality of the situation here is this. He's been caught lying through his teeth. This is a man who said on CNBC, okay, that it was logistically impossible to shut down flights in from Europe. Logistically impossible. You couldn't do that. Okay, and this was his public position, and yet A couple of weeks later, Trump did exactly that, and all of a sudden, oh, well, we did. Wait a minute, I thought you said you can't do that. That doesn't do any good. It doesn't actually stop the spread of the virus. Make up your mind, sir. And then to say that, well, Trump could have taken actions earlier. We advised him to do certain things. He didn't do them. You busted yourself, buddy. And when you get caught lying like that, and he did, then the question becomes, of course, what else did you lie about? And when you're talking about public health, this is not something that we as a people should tolerate out of anybody. I don't care who it is. I just don't care. Okay? Fauci and Birx have pushed public policy based upon models that they knew were bull, that were proved to be nonsense, that blew up on them immediately, essentially. And rather than acknowledge that they were trash and throw them out, they stuck with them and doubled down on the same things. That's not the move of somebody who is a scientist, and it is not the move of somebody who is actually looking at data. It just isn't. So, you could say, well, we're working with the best information we have, yada. There's always an excuse, folks. But when you catch somebody BSing, which happened this weekend in an irrefutable fashion, and it's his BS, not somebody else's, not that you can pin on someone else's, his. It is time to drag those people off the stage by their hair, if necessary, and get them out of the public decision-making process. They have no business being there. I know there's plenty of people who say, oh, well, the Donald's going to go with his gut. No. Listen, folks, there is a cost and a benefit to all decisions. We know that there is going to be cost to reopening the economy. But there is also cost to not reopening the economy. We've destroyed tens of millions of jobs, at least 16 million so far. Could be 20, 30. We don't know exactly how far. I will tell you right now that I know factually that Florida has not captured all of its unemployment because my daughter has had to send in a paper application because she can't get through on the web portal. All right, so how long will it take them to process that? Well, I have absolutely no idea. Eventually, she's going to show up in there, but they force closed her work. She doesn't not want to go to work. She can't go to work because they shut the business down. The government did that. Okay, well, there's a price to this, and that cost is real, and we need to weigh that against, well, are we actually saving lives? Are we changing outcomes? Or are all we're doing is shifting timelines? And that's a public debate to have. And it is the right sort of debate that we should have. But nobody should get a pass on the expense on both sides of the ledger. Okay, we cannot have a fair debate until people are forced to bear the costs of their own decisions. Why are we here? Why do we have all these diabetics running around and people who are hypertensive and everything else that are getting hammered by this virus? And the answer is because you can go out and stuff your pie hole full of cheesecake and other trash every single day. And then when something goes wrong, you can lay it off on someone else. That's the truth, folks. Well, guess what? The same thing's true when it comes to nursing homes. Right? We have all of these. We have this disease that's tearing through these places. We won't talk about the fact that there's an obvious fecal oral transmission route here. We have a lot of incontinent people in nursing homes, and nobody is being held accountable for the fact that that's how, in all probability, how this thing is going through those places. Why didn't we lock down nursing homes and lock the people who work there in? Well, they only make $8 an hour. Well, whose problem is that? Is that everybody else's problem, or is that the people who pay for these services as opposed to taking care of their parents at their own house? Well, it's very hard for us to, I understand that. There's a benefit and a cost, okay? This sort of analysis is supposed to go into decision making. I used to do this every damn day when I ran my internet company, and we destroyed it as a country. That has to come back. That has to. Because if it doesn't, you're never going to make good decisions, especially under stress situations like this. That's what I'll leave you with for today, folks. I'm your Ticker Guy.